Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new series on my channel, what I'm calling the Quest for InfoSec Books, or like Book Quest 2024. So, as a little introduction, I was a big nerd as a child. I'm a big nerd as an adult. I was especially when I was a child, and all I wanted in my house when I grew up was a library. I had a loft bed as a child, so I had a bunk bed, and then underneath I had a couch and a little bookshelf. It was very cozy, the kind of thing that would go like viral on TikTok now. And so I decided I'm an adult with adult money. I'm going to just buy a bookshelf. I'm just going to create the library that I always wanted. So I decided I'm going to make one. I thought about doing like a TikTok IKEA hack, decided I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm a hacker, not a woodworker. So I decided to hire somebody who knows what they're doing. And he was super great. He built this amazing bookcase. But I realized as I was having this created, I used to read a lot of physical books as a child. Of course I did. Now, not so much. Now I use an e-reader. So I am a big fan of e-readers. I have a Books Go here. I actually reviewed this. I really like it. It's a great e-reader, especially if you're like me and want to get away from the Amazon ecosystem. But I've had a Kindle since they came out in the UK. I've had Kindle Paperwhites. I got a Kindle Oasis. You can see actually behind me there, that's pink thing. That's actually a signed Kindle by my favorite author. I don't buy physical books. I buy ebooks. So I thought if they're going to sign something, they should probably sign the Kindle, right? Anyway, I read all on ebooks. I have an e-ink screen. I have a iPad mini as well, which I read on quite a lot. So I don't have any physical books. And I went and spent like a lot of money on this shelf. And I go and I'm like, yes, it's time to fill it with books. And I have a few different types of books. I have books from when I was a child and teenager that I read and got from my mum's, a lot of manga. And I have these, my sketchy hand-bound books, which are like, I printed them out. I buy like the PDFs, I printed it out and I put it in a ring binder because I feel like ring binders have much better like usability for things like textbooks because they lay flat and you can have it open on your desk. You see, I've got also little tabs in here as well. Big fan of just printing out books. And this is really works for textbooks, not so much for other types of books, as we'll say. So join me as I fill my bookcase up with books, like real books. The rules for the books are 1, the book must be relevant to me / good. Now, something can be bad and still be relevant to me, and something can be irrelevant to me but still good. So I'm going to use hacking APIs as an example. As somebody who knows quite a lot about APIs, who used to build them, half of this book is introductory. I actually don't recommend this book if you want to get into API hacking, if you've already consumed a lot of media, because it's probably just going to repeat stuff to you that you don't really care about. But it's still a relevant book, and I still like flicking through it, and I like having a read through it. So it's still a relevant book to me. It's just, it's still a good book. It's just not relevant to me and where I'm at now. 2, it must be at least a 3-star minimum. I do not want to buy physical books that I hate. I don't want to hate read anything. I'm not interested in getting a bunch of books that end up not being, very usable. So 3-star minimums. 3, I must have actually read it from cover to cover with allowances being made for reference books. Hacking APIs is a great book, fantastic book. However, it's not a book you read cover to cover. No textbooks are, especially in InfoSec. You will never get everything out of one book. The best thing to do is to flip through it, find sections that interest you, that kind of you go over something you care about, or maybe just have it open in front of you while you're actually hacking. Allowances being made for most of them, though I want to read it from cover to cover. So hopefully this series will give you some good book recommendations. And let's be honest, we all spend too long looking at screens anyway. We really do need a way to break from the screens. And books can be a really great way of doing that while still feeling like work-related and productive. So that is the quest for InfoSec books. Join me as I review a bunch of books that I have read. So when I was thinking about what books to review first, I went and looked through some of the books that I've already read. And I started with This Is How They Tell Me How the World Ends, which is by Nicole Perlroth. I originally read this on Kindle and Audible via WhisperSync. If you don't know what WhisperSync is, it's an Amazon product that essentially allows you to buy the ebook and pick up the Audible narration, usually for a small cost, a few quid. And the idea is that you can start reading the ebook, read a few pages, then you can switch to the audiobook and it will leave off where you left on the page. So it'll read off where you left on the page so you can listen to a bit, read a bit, listen to a bit, read a bit. And I listen to it mainly on the bus going home from work. The audiobook is fine. There's nothing special about it. There's no, oh, it's a really good narration or it's really well done. It's a very typical book to listen to. So if you're expecting amazing narration, reduce your expectations. It's very basic. This book actually got a lot of flack when it came out because the author of this book is not a cybersecurity person. She's not a hacker. She's a journalist. She is a cybersecurity journalist and she is an expert in cybersecurity. However, it is from a journalist point of view. And while she definitely knows about cybersecurity, she knows what she's talking about and she has that expertise, it's not a textbook. It's not the entire history of cybersecurity as told by Nicole Perlroth. It's not the entire history of cybersecurity as told by a journalist, right? It's very much a very targeted book. Anyway, before I get too much into that, I want to talk a bit about the genre here. So this book is narrative nonfiction. Now, for those who read a lot of nonfiction, you might already be familiar with this. This is where the author of the book takes an active role in the story they're telling, the nonfiction story. It's the author as character. So if you've seen a Louis Theroux documentary before, you'll be familiar with this, where he takes an active role. He goes up to people, and when he's interviewing them, he's not behind the camera. He's in front of the camera and he's playing like the POV of the audience. Now, this is the same kind of idea, just in written format. I'm a big fan of John Ronson, who's very similar to Louis Theroux. So much there's like a long running joke between them that they do the same work. And it's a very similar style to this book, except for in a John Ronson book, it's bumbling Englishman takes on Alex Jones and they go to the middle of a forest and they go watch a shadowy organization, right? That's very different to what this is. This is a much more competent journal, learns about the grey market for 0 days and the role that cyber weapons take in society and where things are going from there. Before I get too much into the actual, I should probably just summarize the entire book. It's fundamentally an exploration of the history of bug hunting from bug track to the 0 day grey market, as told by the people who were there. It feels very much like a written documentary. And as somebody who really didn't know much about bug bounty hunting and kind of the history of it and where it came from, I wasn't even particularly interested in hacking growing up. For me, it was a really good book. It's so accessible. I'm not sure I would describe it as like a put down read, which I think is what they say on the back. Yeah, a 5-alarm page turner. I wouldn't say it's a page turner I couldn't put it down. And it's not really a thriller book. It's definitely really interesting. I remember listening to it and then getting home from getting on the bus and still listening to it because I wanted to hear the story. And I actually learned quite a lot about the grey market. Now, obviously, in bug bounty hunting, we are not in the grey market. We're not selling our vulnerabilities to governments. We're being rewarded for findings. And there's a subtle difference between that and the grey market the book talks about. And so I wasn't really familiar with things like Zerodinium and the 0 Day Initiative and the kind of grey market for bugs. So I learned a lot here. Now, there is a lot of world politics in here. It really shows how InfoSec actually leads the world stage a lot of ways, and it's not really politically neutral. It's got mentions of China, of Five Eyes, North Korea, Russia, Ukraine, Israel. If you're not into world politics and like foreign policy, this is not going to be the book for you. If you'll find it really boring, because it is mainly what happens when hackers sell vulnerabilities to the government. Especially if you're already aware or quite heavily interested in cyber warfare and that kind of size, it's going to feel quite introductory, I think. Saying that, I do think there's a lot of value in here. I was familiar with some of this stuff. I definitely didn't have the full context, especially being in the UK. I don't have context about American elections and what the experience of Hillary Clinton's emails leaking really was, because I wasn't really interested at the time. And I definitely didn't have the same depth and level of politics knowledge or the full context behind quite a lot of this stuff. And the book really made me think about the role that offensive security and the vulnerability marketplace places, and as we as hackers as well, sit in this larger political game of chess. Honestly, if you're not into politics and you're not really interested in foreign policy, maybe this might have actually sparked your interest in it. Maybe this will be the thing you need to have that same realization that I did. You'll also recognize a lot of the names in this book. A lot of them are people who have been involved in bug bounty hunting, and it's neat to hear some of the stories of hacker heroes as well. The book really doesn't take itself too seriously. I love the name of the first chapter here. It goes on the prologue, and then the next chapter is called The Fucking Salmon. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, but again, it doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's like the hacker community in that way. There's little quips from hackers. The same way you would see like expert opinions, you'll see hackers like dunking on each other and dunking on different people. And unironically, I laughed multiple times during this. I thought it was quite funny because it comes really from out of nowhere. You're like reading this very sick like chapter on election scandals, and then and the fucking salmon, man. It was very unexpected, very out there. I laughed in public listening to it because again, it comes out of nowhere. Overview of the book. So we start out by introducing the author and how they got involved. Remember, narrative nonfiction, which means the author takes that active role in, that in the book. They're not a passive observer. We're watching her immerse herself in this community. We're listening to her interview people in this community. Starts with the history of iDefense, which is the first bug bounty as threat intelligence platform. So they paid like medium bounties. You wouldn't call them particularly high now. At the time they were. And the idea is that you could subscribe to this list of vulnerabilities. Then they were approached by the US government, eventually turned them down, but it really didn't stop the creation of this grey market and shady deals. And it follows a few different vulnerabilities and the hackers that found them. So it continues to follow the CIA, the NSA, the Pentagon, those kind of defense organizations. This book is really US heavy as well, by the way. And how the bugs were actually useful, how they were using them in spying campaigns. And this is told by the people who lived it. So this is the journalist interviewing people and them telling their stories. I think it's surprisingly engaging, actually. It's really interesting just to hear people talk about their lives and their careers and what they did and the decisions they made and why they made it. So it's really interesting seeing how everything fits together in this global stage. Again, politics heavy. So do not be surprised if you are not that interested in foreign affairs, and particularly from a US lens. I was really interested though. I was really hooked. I really enjoyed reading it, and the second part feels like a detective novel, a spy versus spy, Russia versus the US. I won't spoil it because I do think it's actually very interesting to listen to and to enjoy in that way. But we end up at Iran's nuclear program and Stuxnet. So I will eventually review a companion book to this, which is Countdown to Zero Day, which I loved. That is such a good book. But that's like this in-depth look at just Stuxnet. And my God, I cannot recommend that book more. That goes into the analysis, all of the details, how it all came together. If you're not familiar with Stuxnet, Stuxnet is this worm that targeted specifically PLCs for centrifuges, making them run a bit faster than they were actually rated for, and eventually it broke the centrifuges. Very cool, interesting, cyber-physical attack. And it was created, we think it was created by the US government and Israel's government to target the Iranian nuclear refinement. And it set back Iranian nuclear refinement years. It used a ton of 0 days. And for the first time, it was this like really sophisticated and expensive book. It's very sophisticated and actually expensive attack. And it was like targeted specifically towards networks in Iran. However, it eventually got out and it didn't actually end up impacting anything else because it was looking for these specific configurations. But it's an interesting change that happened in the market. Instead of mainly it being like threat intelligence and bug bounty hunting, it introduced this idea of, oh, hey, the US government is going to buy these. Again, Countdown to Zero Day goes into so much detail about that. And I really recommend that book. It was a great book. So we then go on to look at the private sector of the zero-day market with things like NSO Group, the rise of nation-state spyware and how governments buy spyware, and then takes us back to the private sector for the opposite of the people working against nation-state spyware. People like Google Project Zero. Really engrossing read. You see this like back and forth between spyware and the hackers trying to stop it, and the private companies and the government and the private companies and and it all just comes together in this really interesting cat and mouse game. I can see why people describe this as very similar to a thriller, put it that way. Throughout the book, we slowly piece together this marketplace, why it exists, how good faith hacking became $1 million export controlled weapons, why hackers choose to sell certain vulnerabilities, and the book ends with another look at global politics again. It's very US-centric. Of course it is. The author is American. It's about America. We get onto the 2016 election. We get onto China, Russia, Iran. But I think at this point, you do understand why it's in the US. It's not in the US because it's the US controls the world. It's in the US because that's where this market both grew from and grew in. It only exists because of how the US government treated the zero-day market. And honestly, it ends with the fact that it blew up in their face. The zero-day market was this get ahead of the other spies, right? And actually at the end, and here's how all the spies target the US the same way. Brilliant. My thoughts. I think if you're already familiar with names like iDefense, BugTrack, Stuxnet, NSO Group, and some of the really well-known hackers associated with things like Project Zero, this is not going to be the book for you. This is going to seem really basic to you. It's basically going to tell you what you already know, but from somebody else's point of view, which is valuable, but it's not that interesting to read. So if you do know a lot of that stuff already, give it a skip. If you're not, or you're new to the government and cyber warfare aspect like I was, I think you'll really enjoy this. I really learned a lot personally, particularly how bug bounties got started and the history of specifically bug bounty hunting. I really wasn't aware that much of the zero-day grey market apart from on Twitter. Yes, given its subject matter, it is going to be very global politics focused. I don't personally think it's left-leaning or right-leaning politically. It doesn't judge any candidates on their views, but it does talk about things like election interference. And it does talk about nation states' motivations towards election cycles. So if you don't believe in things like election interference, I don't think you're going to enjoy this book. It's not going to be the book for you. Saying that, it's also very US-centric. If you have no interest in US history, US politics, you're not really going to enjoy it. Also, don't expect this to cover stuff that doesn't involve the US in some way, shape, or form. It's a US-centric book. As someone in the UK, I found that it was fine. As someone who doesn't really know how the American political system works, I thought it was interesting. Now, I read a lot of narrative nonfiction. This is not my first narrative nonfiction. I found this really easy to read. I could easily follow along with the story, even if I put it down and picked it back up. It feels a lot like fiction in the sense that it is well paced. And for the most part, the stories are really interesting and they're told by the people who live them. So they have a lot of comments to make. As a kind of summary, it made me realize that I'm part of the bigger picture. I'm part of a larger whole, and the role I play as a hacker is just one in this soup of different conflicting ideas. So what's my verdict? I've already picked up the paperback version here. I found this in a regular bookstore in the UK. I didn't have to order it online. I think it was a tenner. Yeah, it was a tenner. And I think that gives you a good idea of the marketplace, actually, and who is supposed to read this. This is general nonfiction for people interested in cybersecurity. Do not expect this to be a cybersecurity textbook. It is not. And I actually really like it. I like that it's not a textbook. I like that it's got a bit more personality. I like the cat and mouse element to it. So I will be putting this on the InfoSec bookshelf as one of the first entries in the InfoSec bookshelf. So, do you have a book that you want me to read and tell you if it's any good? A favorite book to share that I might really enjoy, that I might have missed, a new release you don't want to necessarily get your hype up too soon for? Leave your suggestions in the comments. I'd love to hear what else. Obviously, I've read quite a few different books. I'm not just going to restrict this to like non-fiction books. I'm not just going to restrict this to not textbooks. I'll review anything. But yeah, tell me what else you want me to put on the InfoSec book list. So tell me what else you want me to put on the InfoSec. So tell me what else you want me to put on the InfoSec bookshelf. This one is going on mine, and I will see you all in the next episode. Bye, everyone.